You clicked for the Draken's dangerous secret. Here it is. Sweden turned a pitch instability problem into a weapon. Early J-35A pilots found the double delta could snap into a high AOA superstall. That flaw became the Cobra, a controlled air brake that forced an overshoot. We'll show how Eric Bratt's team used a thick inner delta for fuel, gear, and intakes, and the outer delta for lift, so it could launch from roads, hit Mach 2, and still slow like nothing else. Why did STRIL-60 and later avionics matter for making that trick usable in real interceptions? Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. A wing that could do Mach 2, sprint off road bases, and still hide fuel and landing gear in the thick root sounds like a neat checklist solution, and it was. But it also came with a pitch trap that caught out early crews. The double delta promised 3 wins in one stroke and delivered a 4th. An unpleasant high AOA surprise when the intersection quit first and the nose tried to run away. That curiosity, how a tidy packaging trick produced a stubborn instability, is the hinge of the Draken story. Sweden set the terms in the late 1940s. It needed dispersed basing from short, rough strips, fast climb to meet high-altitude threats, and low operating costs to keep an air defense force on alert across a long border. It was therefore a design brief about access and readiness as much as speed. Eric Bratt's team answered with a plan form that put structure and systems inboard and lift insurance outboard. And they proved the idea the slow, hard way through the Saab 210, the Lil Draken demonstrator that flew extensively to map the edge cases. The thick inner delta worked like a fuselage annex. It held fuel volume without external tanks, swallowed the main landing gear, and provided intake stations that stayed clean in pitch and roll. So, weight and plumbing lived in a low-drag neighborhood close to the center of gravity, which kept mass where the control system could manage it. The outer, slender panels were cut for higher lift coefficients at low speed, so the aircraft could lift off from short road strips, rotate with authority, and stay controllable in ground effect. But the 2 deltas did not speak with one voice at high angle of attack. The intersection's larger thickness and lower sweep made its boundary layer separate earlier, so the first strong vortices and then the first stall cues formed inboard. As the inboard flow let go, the center of pressure jumped aft and the wing body pitched up. If the pilot chased the motion with more pull, the wing could enter deep vortex attachment and blank the tail. That is the pitch trap. The airplane tells you to pull and then takes the elevator away. Early J-35A flights recorded short-period pitch oscillations and a genuine superstall risk at high AOA in the transonic to low supersonic band. Training syllabi put explicit cautions on high-rate pull-ups and abrupt elevator steps near the buffet. Engineers refined the control system to soften the short-period mode and adjusted gains to help the jet ride through compressibility changes without triggering the runaway pitch-up. So pilot workload came down and recoveries became more consistent. Single delta contemporaries like the Mirage family line offered a simpler story. One big sweep, one vortex system, and stall onset that walked spanwise in a more linear way. The Draken's double brake changed the timing. The inner vortex could strengthen and then fail while the outer panel still lifted, which raised peak lift but narrowed the margin for graceful recovery if the pilot overshot the AOA gate. It was a trade between low-speed lift and high AOA temperament. By this point, the airframe could reach a service ceiling consistent with high-altitude intercept work and go beyond Mach 2 with the RM6B/C series installed. But that speed came with drag you had to pay for. At low level, the planform's area and the engine's specific fuel use produced decent economy for a sprint to a commit point and a return. At high speed, drag rise made endurance short, which matched a doctrine of short, high-intensity intercepts steered by ground control. One way or another, the instability that threatened the program became an asset. The same pitch-up that once spiked heart rates could be managed as an energy dump when used with discipline. So the double delta gave the Draken its UFO outline and, with it, a habit, rapid pitch-up and the potential for high AOA superstall that set the conditions for a usable air brake maneuver. We can now move on to how pilots codified that behavior into court parade, the practical Cobra, and made it survivable and useful. How do you brief a maneuver that begins by asking the airframe to cross the line? In the Draken community, court parade had a clear purpose. Shed closure in a heartbeat, then hand the jet back to the pilot before the opponent can exploit the pause. It was taught as a sharp, high AOA pitch excursion, short of the sustained deep stall used in airshow dramatics, followed by a pre-planned recovery. Syllabi called for a fast but bounded entry, a clean configuration, and altitude in reserve, so the induced drag spike could do its work without eating into terrain margins. In training, court parade typically sat in a bracketed envelope. Crews learned to enter from a sustained intercept speed with a defined minimum height gate so the deceleration phase had headroom. The call-out centered on attitude change, AOA peak, and time to stabilize, and the safe band prioritized predictable pitch rates rather than the largest nose swing. The logic was simple. Create a transient air brake without handing the airplane to the vortex. The risks were real. A superstall in this airframe meant deep vortex attachment on the inner wing, a blanking of tail influence, and, if provoked, a stubborn loss of pitch authority. Early pilots, working before the refinements, found that an over-eager pull could push the Draken past the line where a standard unload no longer bit. So the maneuver lived or died on discipline. Hit the target AOA, then stop, and recover on a schedule instead of waiting for the jet to talk you out of it. Control system tuning, combined with technique, made that schedule repeatable. Engineers calmed the short-period oscillation and adjusted gains through the transonic region so the elevator felt consistent as the flow changed. Pilots learned to lead with a precise pitch rate, add throttle in the recovery window to reattach flow, and keep the nose from bobbing through the band where the tail went soft. Later variants layered avionics that supported the timing, so you could trigger the excursion at the point where the opponent least wanted to see it. That timing often came from STRIL-60. Ground nodes could send digital steering to build a collision course intercept, and that geometry was ideal for a sudden drag wall. With the PS-03/A radar and S-7A-2 sight, the cockpit cues lined up. Target track stabilized, closure known, brake cue reached. Then the briefed pitch hit on the dot so the overshoot unfolded where the sight could no longer hold you. Export users added their own tools. Denmark's 35XD received a WDNS with a Marconi 900 series HUD and a Ferranti LRMTS, and operators paired those with RWR plus chaff and flares. The net effect was better awareness of the merge setup and the threat picture, which widened the safe windows for court parade even as their tasking emphasized different roles. If you know where the bandit is and where the ground is, you can make a short amplitude energy dump without gambling on guesswork. Overshoot mechanics stayed straightforward. If the attacker's energy state and closure exceed the turning room available, and your aircraft throws a sudden induced drag spike, the pursuer runs out of nose authority before he runs out of speed. The Draken's planform obliges with a rapid decel when pitched briskly through the briefed angle, so the opponent's sight or radar lock walks off and the pass is forced. Public demonstrations made Cobra famous, but the Draken's version stayed practical. Shorter amplitude, tighter timing, and a focus on breaking locks and forcing geometry errors, rather than hanging the jet on its tail for applause. By this point, the aircraft had become the first Western type to use a repeatable, Cobra-style superstall as a defensive tool, not theater. A codified move with guardrails, taught, checked, and used when the network set the table. With that institutional knowledge in place, the story bends toward doctrine. Less raw speed, more fluency and managed instability under a guided intercept. Mastery through mitigation is the Draken's real contribution. The double delta's instability became a controlled instrument because pilots drilled court parade, engineers tuned the short period mode, and strill-linked cues fixed the timing. It was therefore a system, not a trick. If you want the engineering behind tactics, say so in the comments, and propose which Cold War jets turned flaws into features. The UFO outline was a choice: thick inner delta for systems, slender outer for lift, and a known pitch trap harnessed on purpose. By this point, the airframe reads like a textbook on turning unstable aerodynamics into options, and the lesson continues in later adopters.